Eskom has announced the return of load shedding. It follows a brief reprieve during the festive season. Load shedding resumed this morning after being suspended continuously for 18 days. Now, this is the longest period without load shedding since the 30th of May the 20th of June, to the 20th of June 2022, which was 19 days or 442 hours. Stage 2 power cuts were implemented from 5 a.m. today up until 4 p.m. Load shedding will then be ramped up to stage 3 before alternating with stage 2 into the week. The power utility has attributed the return to a loss of 6 generating units and a projected increase in electricity demand. To unpack this further, we're joined by Hugo Kruger, who's a civil engineer from Truth and Energy. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika. What do you attribute the latest news that we're hearing now of load shedding being brought back? I mean, surely it was to be expected.
Yes, I'm not actually shocked that this is was going to occur. So Eskom normally has about 5,000 megawatt or 5 gigawatt on plant maintenance, but if you recall, the Minister of Electricity in December said because of the drop in demand due to factories switching off during the December holidays, they were going to do opportunity maintenance. So I looked this morning, it's about 8 gigawatts, so they took 3 units off. So that's okay still because demand hasn't entirely gone up, but as the factories are now going to start opening up, demand will increase. So the question is, what do you bring in between? And theoretically speaking, if all goes well, there's not supposed to be load shedding, but that never happens in any system, so there are trips. And there's no reserve margin in Eskom. There's no fat in the system, basically. I make this statement, there is no lack of capacity in South Africa, but we don't have that safety valve. So if something goes wrong, we have load shedding. And that's why you're seeing the stage 1, stage 2, stage 4, things of that sort happening. And I suspect that's going to continue going on for at least the first 6 months of this year.
We know that Electricity Minister Kgosintse Ramokgopa had revealed that during the festive period, Eskom will be undergoing aggressive maintenance of power stations. As load shedding resumed this morning, how then will we begin to assess the impact of the work that has been happening behind the scenes? Because the real test comes, of course, on the other side of the break when big industries start operations again.
Yes, but the minister's claims was a bit misleading. You cannot do aggressive maintenance in only 1 month, actually 2 weeks. It's impossible. So yes, you can do what I think the word he used was opportunity maintenance. So if there's an opportunity to replace a big component, you can do that. But the big challenge in South Africa remains this. We need to find a way to overhaul the entire coal fleet. But what the minister doesn't want to say to the public is this. If you do proper maintenance, you have to take your unit off load. Right, and that's going to impose load shedding. And there is a few ways out of this for the government. They finally sort of come around, but they haven't really taken any action yet, and I don't understand why. There's 2,000 megawatts of broken and abandoned coal stations at Eskom. Okay, just broken, abandoned from years ago. We don't actually know what the level of all of them is, but they can send in an engineering team and they can repair them. And they can do a proper plan to bring them back online to have excess capacity. We don't have a reserve margin at Eskom. So all this talk of maintenance is superficial at best because they can't do it. They haven't done proper maintenance since the Soccer World Cup. Because every time that somebody proposes to do a complete overhaul, the politicians say, yes, okay, we're going to do it. And then they realize very quickly, well, that's going to mean more imposed load shedding. So then they backtrack. And the longer you delay the actual maintenance that needs to take place, the more we're going to see this happening.
What about the addition of Kusile Power Station Unit 5 to the national grid? I mean, surely that was, hailed as good news.
Yes, but it's not going to generate electricity until, I believe it's June this year. Eskom themselves said, yes, it is synchronized to the grid, but it's going to be intermittent electricity, little burst of electricity until later this year only. So yes, it's good news. It's excellent that they finally completed it. I hope nothing goes wrong again. We don't know because of the shady engineering originally. But Kusile Power Station's Unit 5 is not going to do anything to reduce load shedding.
After what was a nightmarish year insofar as load shedding is concerned, the minister also set another target, hoping to increase energy availability to 60% by March of this year. Is this a realistic target?
If all goes well, yes. If all goes well and Kusile comes back online by, March is a bit early, it is possible. So what he's hoping on it is recovering what we call thermal efficiency. It is the units who have lost, who are underperforming, and get a little bit more out of them. It's been possible since the beginning of last year to do so. But then, it comes down to the practicalities. What maintenance needs to be done, what needs to be budgeted, and sometimes it's just delay in time. Because to fix these units, you have a certain procedure that needs to be followed. And if you're going to rush it, it's not going to work. But it's theoretically possible, in my view, to get to actually exit load shedding only using only from Eskom's coal fleet. But it will take proper engineering management, proper requirements proper requirement management, proper maintenance plans. Okay. In 2016 and 17, this was achieved in South Africa. There was a management at Eskom at that time that prioritized maintenance, and they actually recovered the thermal efficiencies of the plant. But now we're 5 years later, so it's a question of the aging of the fleet, and all of those things that needs to take place before that can work.
What does a proper maintenance plan look like?
So you have different types of maintenances. You have what is the routine maintenance, where Eskom has 5 gigawatt on routine maintenance, right? Then what they did in December is what they would call the opportunity maintenance. They do proper inspections of certain components, and they say, okay, the major ones, we can replace that in 2 to 3 weeks. But then what you need to do is we need to do a proper overhaul of the coal fleet. And that is the one that has been delayed because that will impose load shedding. And to do that, it takes 6 months to a year sometimes per unit. Right? What they actually did at Kusile and Medupi to fix those units, you can argue that was proper maintenance. Okay, those were design modifications. But that is the type of delay that you were looking at on some of your units to actually fix all of them. And my view is once we have the excess capacity, once they get the gas from Mozambique, which will only come on in September this year, best estimates, once they get the car power ships, if enough bribes have been paid, because I don't know why that's being held up, then you've got that fatness system. Then government can say, okay, we now need to take some units off and start doing a bit of a proper overhaul of the entire coal fleet. But we're not there yet. We don't have the excess margin yet to even start thinking of it. So at the moment, they're basically trying to squeeze as much out of the stations. It's good what they're doing, but I don't think we have enough generation capacity in South Africa, and we don't have a government that is actually, being frank about this, is say, look, load shedding is going to continue for the rest of the year. And it is going to be stage 1 and stage 2. And if you want to properly maintain it, it will mean more load shedding in the meanwhile. If not, we're going to have these trips every day.
Yeah. So in all these efforts aimed at ending load shedding, what more do you think needs to be done to address the issues around increasing generation capacity, expanding the transmission network, and collecting revenue at the point of distribution?
Okay, so this was the last question, revenue and point of distribution. There's a big debate now. As everyone knows, Eskom's revenue is falling because of the expansion of rooftop solar. I'm not against rooftop solar. I think that's one of the best things that's happened in South Africa because it will prevent a complete blackout. But if you pay electricity in kilowatt hours, only 10% of that price is actually for energy. Okay. So what needs to happen is Eskom needs to bring capacity charges because that 90% is now being offset by the generation of solar panels. That means the municipalities have a shortfall in revenue. Okay. That means Eskom has a shortfall in revenue. And that's not me saying Eskom needs more money. They need more money to just do their daily operations to the end user. So NERSA needs to bring in capacity charges. People will have to pay fixed charges and variable charges to customers. You can imagine that is not an election-winning issue, so I don't see that happening. Okay. Then that's for Eskom to try and recapitalize. The second point about generation is There's been a few options on the table. Every year, government has to allocate, in my view, at least 5 gigawatt of renewable energies, wind and solar and stuff. But the transmission grid is full in the Western Cape and in the Northern Cape. So it's going to, the renewables have slowed down a little bit as a result of that. Yes, they need to build more transmission lines. To do so, they've gotten loans from the World Bank. Those projects must continue as they are doing. Okay. Then the critical one is bringing liquefied natural gas on the system. Why? Because liquefied natural gas will give you that buffer to do maintenance. But in order to do that, you need to look into an import facility, particularly at Richards Bay. We will have gas coming from Mozambique as well. They will generate it there. So that's an option as well. If liquefied natural gas scales in South Africa, then it will be much easier to get out of load shedding. But now you and I both know there's a car power ship waiting to be connected in Richards Bay, and that deal is murder of corruption, right? So that's again another failure of government to procure them. But we need that car power ship. We need the natural gas to help the system. And then the other one is government must continue with the expansion of nuclear power. Why? Because all our plants are now coming to the end of their lifetime, all the coal fleet. Right, except for Kusile and Medupi. And if Kusile and Medupi works well, we will have a major deficit in 10 years from now, much more than we have right now. So the nuclear plants must continue. And I'm a believer that we need a nuclear mass build. I think in 2016-17, that nuclear bill, maybe we shouldn't bought them all at once, but that 9.6 gigawatt was a good strategy for long-term for South Africa. So you need a short-term, medium-term, long-term solution. And if government's only going to focus on the short-term, then in 5 years you and I are going to have the same interview again.
Yeah. So very quickly, before we let you go, how should all of this information now translate through the mind of the end user, the consumer, in terms of preparation and being able to manage the different stages of load shedding insofar as business is concerned, as well as general households? How should they be preparing?
So I would say for a general household, do the following. Okay, if you can afford it, not everyone can afford it, get a solar panel for your geyser, okay, and start cooking on natural gas. Cooking on gas. Why? Because those are the two major consumers. 60% of Eskom's customers are residential consumers. There's a lot of wastage. Get a time switch if you have a swimming pool. You can't run it all day long, for example. Things of that sort. They start doing what we call demand-side management. Right? In terms of businesses, it's a bit more complicated. South Africa, in my view, should theoretically have sufficient capacity during the day. And you can use solar panels to have it if you have a business that is not in heavy industry. But the people who I feel really sorry for are those in heavy industry. I don't have a straight answer to them because they also require the evening peak to be met, those in heavy manufacturing. And that, in my view, that's one of my biggest fears in South Africa, is that we don't have sufficient capacity for our mines and for our factories. And then basically only those who work in services are going to be okay, but those who work in the heavy industries will really suffer. And that's actually where your biggest job creation is, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. Hugo Kruger, civil engineer from Truth and Energy, painting a reality there when it comes to the impact of load shedding in South Africa.